after Bush's preemptive war. In 2010, free countries made a joke of our laws again. In fact, Libya was voted to join United Nations Human Rights Council, despite appeals by numerous human rights advocacy groups for a clear rejection of Libya's candidacy for the world body's top human rights body. Only 33 countries did so in a secret ballot election. Muammar Gaddafi's regime garnered 155 votes out of 188 cast, far more than the minimum 97 required. 5 countries abstained. Apart from Libya, the United Nations Human Rights Council membership at the time included China, Sudan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Zimbabwe, Cuba, Vietnam and Russia.
How many roads must a man walk down?
We have recognized already a long time ago, after the Second World War, that there are human rights that apply to every human being. Rather than to states and areas with different religions, it's supposed to apply to individuals.
Since the inception of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights half a century ago, the world has watched a series of genocides and human atrocities, including the massacre of Bosnians in a supposedly UN-protected safe area, the slaughter of just under 1 million Rwandans in 1994, and the carnage of 5.4 million victims in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Libya, 2009. The court system is controlled by the state. Citizens continue to be arbitrarily arrested and detained, with no right to a fair trial.
5 Bulgarian nurses and the Palestinian doctor were arrested in 1999 on the allegation that they were involved in a huge HIV infection, infecting 450 children.
The 5 nurses and I were falsely arrested, prosecuted, imprisoned, brutally tortured, convicted and sentenced to death 3 times.
Tortures included beating with sticks, using current, hanging on the window sill and the inner sash, and finally, in May 1999, they took off my clothes and used electric stick touching the intimate place between my legs and the nipples of my breast.
The torture was so severe that there was no option left for them either to die or to confess.
Libya is a ratified member of the UN Convention Against Torture. Membership to the UN's human rights conventions is voluntary.
The trouble with the United Nations is you can be a member of the Human Rights Council without having the least bit of interest in protecting human rights. Saudis are members of the Human Rights Council, the lead UN human rights body, the Cubans, the Chinese, the Russians. There are no membership criteria other than geography.
Iran, 2009. Any citizen can be sentenced to capital punishment for the crime of undermining the state. The definition of this term is arbitrary, most recently including political dissent, conversion out of Islam, and homosexuality. A large number of those executed are children under the age of 18. Ahmad Batebi was sentenced to death for having been randomly photographed for The Economist magazine during a student demonstration.
They tied my hands to the chair and they kept me awake so long that eventually I lost consciousness, and then they cut me and put salt in the wound so that I would wake up from the pain.
I was a student filmmaker in Tehran University. We was active about human rights, women's rights and children's rights. In '98 we had one demonstration, and the Iranian government arrested me and my friends and sent to jail. Government told me you must dead because you show bad face of Iranian government.
Sudan, 2009. The ongoing massacre in Western Sudan began 6 years ago. The Sudanese military, together with government-sponsored militia, are systematically slaughtering citizens from the southern English-speaking farming tribes. So far, 500,000 have been murdered and 3 million displaced.
The genocidal government of Sudan came to the power, and in the earlier stage of this government, they crushed my family. They were burning my village down early morning, and they were killing over 50 people of my own people.
In 2008, the International Criminal Court filed 10 charges of war crimes against the incumbent Sudanese president, Omar al-Bashir.
That was a truly historic judgment. And it was the first time that it was done within the context of ongoing criminality. Now, the problem is that the International Criminal Court has no enforcement powers. They are dependent on the country whose national has been indicted or against whom an arrest warrant is issued, surrendering the person to the International Criminal Court, or the UN Security Council forcing it to do so. The UN Security Council can seek to enforce the arrest warrant against al-Bashir. I suspect that's unlikely to happen. It's equally clear that Sudan will not surrender neither Ahmed Haroun nor al-Bashir. So the question is, what can be done?
For the Durban Review Conference, I will tell you clearly, I don't put a big hope. Because the issue of Darfur is not in, of course. They are not coming to condemn the racism of Sudanese government and the genocide which is still going on or continued in with a slow motion. We have more than 10 or 15 resolutions. None of them was taken in action. Shows that the racism is starting in the UN itself. That's what is taking place right now.
How can your government chair the Planning Committee for a World Conference on Discrimination when it is on the list of the worst when it comes to discrimination and human rights violations?
The United Nations is controlled by countries that are not fully free democracies. It's simply a matter of the numbers. It really isn't very complicated to understand. There are 192 member states of the United Nations. 117 or 18 of them belong to the so-called non-aligned movement, which is really aligned against the United States and other free and democratic societies.
So we come back to the need for some moral and political and diplomatic and juridical leadership from a quarter that will be respected and maybe acted upon.
But we don't have that vehicle. We simply sit down at the UN, throw our hands up and say, well, that's all there is. Well, whose fault is that? You know, the agency's more than 60 years old, and it's about time we got creative in the 21st century about thinking about a vehicle for actually making some progress on democracy, because the UN isn't going to do that for us.
I wouldn't throw the system away because not all states are accepting exactly the same rules. There's still common ground for discussion. It's a big world. Yeah, it's not easy to have some rules accepted worldwide.